This is the Civilization Battle Royale X, Season 4, Episode 31, Walls Caving In. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The sun dawns on the cylinder for another round of bloodshed and conquest. Today I, Caitlin, will be joining Paige in covering this release. Last time we wrote a narration, it was all the way back in May, so it's nice to be writing again. If you all are not familiar with systems or plurality, feel free to do a quick Google search, but TLDR, Paige and I are in the same body but are distinct people. If you want to learn more, join the Discord server. We're active there and it's also just a great place. We left off with Royal Hungary falling to Bavaria and Burgundy and Pueblo being eliminated from the game by England and the Yellowknives respectively. Bora-Bora is raging across South America and greatly hindering the Tehuelche and consolidating their gains. You gotta Bora believe. We also approach the atomic era, which I'm sure bodes well for the innocent civilians of the cylinder. Without further delay, let's get into it. Sonic Fan 0511's map, as always, is very much appreciated, and from here we can review the changes from before. We can see how the wars in South America have reshaped the continent, where Bora-Bora has come to dominate the southern half, and a stalemate happens in the north. In North America, not much is happening, in contrast to Asia, where Siam has lost cities to Singapore, who lost cities before. Wagi is becoming scary, while Zheng flakes out of a war with Iko-Iki. In Europe, the pharaohs decide that England doesn't deserve peace, and have set up an invasion force south, while at the same time, Eswatini is facing its demise in Africa. Oh, also the Niv-Tuli War. Hope you're all caught up now. Using my power of favoritism, this week's OC pick is Orange Chrissy's Pacific Pals post, False Alarm. I didn't think you could mess up a war against Iko-Iki at this point in the game, but if any civ will make such a mistake, it would be Zhang. Thank you all who have helped support this project. It means so much to the team behind it, and those who have been following since their childhood, such as us. Let's keep this project alive as long as possible. If you have some money to spare, feel free to send some to the Blue Cassette team. Siam has had the largest tumble this episode, losing 7 ranks, which really, they deserve to fall even further, seeing as they're genuinely in a horrible position. A recovery is technically possible, but the AI doesn't know how to pull off miraculous recoveries. Turn 380. Things are looking very bad for the Tehuelche, 2 cities in the red and more reinforcements coming soon. While the Tehuelche aren't in a position to take their cities back, survival is technically possible. Possible in the way that you can get out of bankruptcy by a lottery ticket, but still. I'd be shocked if Maria survives this episode. The Tehuelche settler on the Pacific side of the tip actually is positioned in a place that could prolong survival by a few turns, but a newly placed city will not be able to lead to their continuation. The frozen sleeping giant awakens for its regularly scheduled snipes before returning to its nap. While these gains could end up long-term, and that's what I'm leaning towards being more likely right now, units are sparse on the front lines. The Faroe Islands prefer naval snipes over large land-based armies, which makes the gains harder to keep. With the bulk of England's land forces stationed in the now conquered Burgundy, any English rebuke of Faroe gains remains dubious. Goguryeo and Siam have made peace with no changes. What a waste of time. The 4th Infantry of the nation, stationed without major supplies after being left for dead and surviving against all odds, acts as reconnaissance on the western flank of the Goguryeo and the northern flank of Siam, maintaining a close eye on the movements of troops and interfering with trade and supplies. While they act more as a terrorist unit than a military regiment, messengers sneak through the desolate and mountainous Tibetan plateau between the unit and Qingliangang. They largely maintain themselves through imposing taxes on the few people living there, and raiding nearby trading posts, mines, and farms for food, killing all in their way. Nader Shah grew tired of the old cars of this modern era and wanted something that went as fast as technology would allow. His staff, hearing about this, ignored his vain desires and started their trek to Samarkand. Halfway through and crossing the Ettrek River, their car began to stutter, and they had to pull over in the middle of a mid-sized town, halfway between Isfahan and Tehran. One of them asked a local about any car shops nearby, and recommended Ferrari's shop. Hopeful, they walked across the arid countryside, fed by aqueducts, until they reached a dingy shop. Knocking at his door, an annoyed and unfriendly Enzo answered. Once the staff explained the situation, Enzo initially refused to help, even if they were the Shah's staff, until they offered him a decent restitution for his labor. He chuckled and offered for them to use one of his racing cars for the trip, which the staff excitedly agreed to. They let Enzo take their car as collateral until they returned. Upon returning, they offered Ferrari an audience with the Shah, which he agreed. Upon meeting in Mashhad, they quickly agreed to, in exchange for a unique luxury car, the Shah would give him enough money for him to work on any project he desired. How could Enzo say no? The Selkup's core is somewhat sparse, especially in the center and snow times north. Progress in the war has been very slow, and seems neither party is fully committed to this war at this time. Regardless, I'm rooting for Vonya here, as this war will probably result in a stalemate or mild Selkup gains like before. Henry did not care that you couldn't take cities with settlers. His empire had the Reaper at the windowsill, tapping the glass, just as it was reaching its potential as a contender for world power. He desperately sent orders in a frenzy, unclear and panicked. His units, so far between with no communication, left major holes in their lines. Every unit took damage they couldn't take. Every unit lost men they couldn't lose. Every unit lived with death hanging over their head. At any time, some northerner could come in and bring them to an early demise. Infantry are outside London, Your Highness. Henry collapsed. If he couldn't stay in this world, he'd go out screaming. During his mental breakdown, he sent multiple declarations of war out before his advisors were able to get him grounded. Henry decided that he could do no good at this time, and resolved to sleep before making more decisions. He would never be the same. Tonight, the paratroopers are going to blind me, but I won't feel blue. The Wagi have one of the first units of the atomic era, which can pillage tiles or move 9 times in friendly territory without movement cost. They are also rapidly approaching the technologies needed for the Manhattan Project, which should be fun to see how that goes. While they could build their core more, they need to expand, especially with Nungar just to the south. Tech advantage alone does not win wars, but we'll see how things develop. Wah! Turn 381. While Singapore is losing elsewhere, they successfully took the Siamese capital last episode. Now that peace has come, they need to focus on maintaining these successes. Singapore isn't positioned well, but they certainly have a way to try and survive. Losing Hawaii lost them a lot of their safety and expansion path, and now things are going to be a lot harder. Kanem Bornu is plotting against the Rosvi. Well, I'm not sure what there is to plan against, honey. But hey, best wishes to you. Still, we get a chance to look at the Kanem Bornu core, which is shockingly sparse. It's a lot of empty space, but they certainly need to produce more units if they want a chance. They still have crossbowmen in Agadir, Bornu, Minya, and Nijmi, for goodness sake. They're just simply in a bad position, and refuse to do anything to make things better. Koluel Kaike has fallen. Unfortunately, it's over for the Tehuelche. There is no hope for them to maintain their position outside of a surprise white peace, which I doubt Bora-Bora will offer when they've not even taken the capital yet. Unfortunately, you will not beat an army of tanks and riflemen with musketmen, trebuchets, and crossbowmen. When this war ends, Bora-Bora will certainly rise in the power rankings, but they will need to make sure they can deal with New Holland and Ecuador before they can make their plans on world conquest. Also, that's a cute New Holland armada there. Upon waking from his slumber, his advisors helped lead the charge against land forces from the Pharaoh's army and have retaken Coventry. English Marines and riflemen are crossing the English Channel, and things are somewhat more optimistic for the English. The same fundamental issues that existed before still are there, but it's now a race against time. In a prolonged war, the English Navy will falter and cut off any new units from the mainland. If Henry can retake Bristol and maintain the cities, he may be able to wipe peace. It'd be hard to compete again, but the English are not out yet. Oh, you like the fake-out? Yeah, I thought so, England Stan. Bavaria declares war on the English, giving the English a fight they didn't need on top of another fight they didn't need. A war on every single front, barring the Visigoths. Wait, England declared war? Well, fuck me gently with a chainsaw. It looks like Saba, dabadoo, dabadee, dabada, is hoping to snipe Malkerns before they lose all of their African territory, which is so based, but they may or may not be able to pull it off quite yet. Maybe another turn or two. If you're going to take a city, you need at least one melee unit on the front lines, not cannon in front of it. This isn't the worst setup, to clarify, but it also isn't the best either. Ibarra looks set to flip, but maybe will flip back and forth a few times. New Holland is looking pretty good up north, while Ecuador's interior is looking dry, I suppose. About as dry as I like my wine, really. You don't even drink wine, Kate. I can whine all I want. Their army is still drier than this joke. Singapore, in their valiant efforts, have decided to take their fleet across the sea and try to take cities in Vijayanagara. Do you think that's dry too? Please, their army transports look a bit small, and if you're going to cross half an ocean, you'll want a larger and better prepared armada than this. I'm somewhat skeptical of the optics in this conflict, and it seems like a war that will exhaust Singapore's resources even further. We'll see how things go from here. I may be wrong. Good timing, Kossuth. As Rama is just putting the tiniest pieces of his country together, Gushi Khan swiftly moves into his western flank and seems poised to take at least 2 cities in the next 2 turns. We get to see the Kossuth's unique unit, a lancer replacement that is effective at taking cities and converts those cities to their religion. A very powerful unit in the correct circumstances, which this seems to be. Siam, if they don't manage to maintain their country, is doomed, if Rama wasn't already after Singapore came by. No progress has been seen on land or at sea, and both powers seem to be somewhat stalling for time. But on Franz von Hipper of the Thule, he promised to make this naval attack matter, as if his career depended on it. Really, he'd be forgotten if this went wrong. Turn 382. It's everyone's favorite time of the slides, looking at how the different governments are anachronistic and uncharacteristic of the civilizations portrayed. Starting out with our despotic anarchist buddies in Machnovia. Also, the names are pretty fun, such as President Pahuska's title. I really do love this mod, by the way. It's super cool. Also interesting how it uses king, not queen, here. A social democratic elective monarchy in the Caribbean. Wowie meowie. Conservative Socialist Alliance of the Faroe Islands. Wild mod. The Progressive Nomadic Hordes of Northwest America. I'd vote for a party like that. Giving the trans people here a reason to love Singapore, I see. As a note, I do love it when edge cases are handled well in stuff. The In Exile edition is really useful and adds some lovely flavor to the mod. Maria lagged behind the rest of the continent despite her small efforts. The Bora-Bora, technologically advanced and militarily superior, took over their entire empire, leaving them to die in 47th place. Sure, the city could flip, and leave their former capital in even more ruins before being taken back the next turn. Punni the Conqueror, as one Bora-Bora fan says to us often, has that dog in them. And she does have that dog in her, too. A city that goes between being held by England and flipped by another civ? Where have I seen that before? If you've been paying attention to the minimap, you'll have seen it has flipped back and forth a few times. Henry has now gone so far as to arm settlers, it seems, to refill the cities that are basically ruins now. His ships to the east have mostly sunk to the bottom of the sea, with the possibility of rearming from the mainland about to be cut off, while also being invaded from the west due to his own declaration of war. Lincoln is also looking bad, and he's not going to get that city back if he loses it. If Henry wants to survive round one of the Faro-English wars, or to make things last, he needs to take his cities in Britain and white peace. But I find this possibility increasingly unlikely with how much damage England has taken. But Henry is anything but dovish. As I said, they had the ability to flip the city, which most civs would do in this situation, seeing as they will literally die without a city. It won't last long, unfortunately, as Bora-Bora has more forces in the south alone, and multiple ships crossing the Drake Passage to ensure that any survival is not long-lived. It's been a rough game for indigenous or First Nation civs in South America, with both being wiped out in the same couple of episodes. Bora-Bora from here has become one of the 3 colossal players in South America, but will they be able to defend it against New Holland? Ecuador isn't of much concern, as you saw in the shots before, but New Holland is scary. Here we have a good shot of what remains of Finland's core. Dense, but filled with outdated units that could be taken out extremely quickly. If Rikyo Maya of the Ume-Sami wants to get back in the game, they need to strike before Carlos Ulmanis of Latvia does. I find the latter more likely, unfortunately for us and our picks. The fact that Finland has survived this long is a testament to the timidity of civs around them towards them, as Ume-Sami had 2 bad wars and never tried again, and Latvia has its own cycling that make it hard to predict. This city was so poorly defended that it's basically zero shock that it flipped within a turn to the Kossuths. With the units pouring in, it may turn into a Norwich, flipping between civs that try to keep their gains. The Kossuths certainly are focusing on Nakhon Ratchasima, which is a fair goal strategically, but it would have made more sense to move more units up north to be able to maintain their gains in the north at the same time. What are you going to do? It's the AI, and it has worse planning than a crackhead in Columbus. Woody Guthrie is a Selkirks, writing part of their burgeoning folk music movement in the major cities in minor communes up north. Where the government couldn't reach, music rang free. Some of his most popular songs would be This Land Is Your Land, Astana Massacre, and Old Man Vonya. He is soon to perform in Hisa, and is widely expected to continue his anti-government performances. Old Man Vonya seemed to let the music be as a form of controlled dissent. A few chords won't strike a light into a generation. Right? Okay, we honestly forgot the Wagi were at war with Siam. That's a snipe we were not really expecting. I'm not even sure how it slipped our mind, but I respect the move. I'm skeptical of how many moves they'll take against the flip, as they have another civ barreling through their northwest, and they need as many units as they can for that front. They might try to snipe Ratchasima as well, but that wouldn't hold for long, frankly. Siam is done soon. It's just a matter of time until we see them die. The Thule flip Viskovo, but I find it unlikely that it'll hold long term, and will end up like Norwich as many cities have been in this game. The addition of plans has made war much more destructive in the cylinder, as you can see in Nurgan, and it seems the Thule are bent on using every advantage they can to build their empire. In Kuno, the first production of an analog magnetic tape able to record and store audio was being produced, what would be named the cassette tape. A few traditional songs were recorded, but they needed a way to promote the new audio format across the entire empire. William Baskinsky, Known locally for his avant-garde style of music and development of the experimental, ambient, and drone genres in the Wagi Empire, was selected to help promote the new style, where he would perform a concert live and promote the product and machines to listen to the concert. So a gigantic concert was planned in Kuno, and people flocked to the stadium from across the entire empire, recorded the entire concert, being loaded into a cassette tape. After the performance was over, he announced the entire album was saved on these strips of tape. He chuckled, then threw it to the ground and stepped on it, exclaiming that this moment would be between them all forever. This was a stunt, of course. While that decided to hold a copy of the concert, multiple were recording the entire time, and this stunt led to a huge demand for the ability to save magical moments forever. Turn 383. Maria, staying by the side of her people, fought to maintain the capital, leaving bombs and traps in the street for Bora-Bora to fall into. Maria would not give up easily, but even as she stood tall, better guns will always win over honor. Eventually, the Bora-Bora had her surrounded, and without their leader, her remaining troops let the Bora-Bora capture the city in exchange for their lives, something the Bora-Bora would refuse to honor soon enough once Maria is given the wall. A strong fight and a strong woman, her efforts were ruined by her own reluctance early on, being unable to fill up the continent and prevent Bora-Bora from keeping a foothold. Honor only takes you to your grave with your ego intact. Bless your soul. Ecuador decides to join in kicking the dead horse called Eswatini, where we get a good shot of what remains of the primary territory of the nation. Once a continental empire, they've been relegated to only the Mascarene Islands and a few Antarctic colonies with little to no ability to sustain themselves. Hluti was taken a bit ago by Saba, who has sent a few outdated and damaged units to a city with walls. Not the most sketchy move Saba has made this season, but definitely up there. And all Labatsibene Mdluli does is wander in his new capital, exiled from the mainland, pondering what to do. Henry's few troops on the island manage to retake Bristol, even if he knows that there's little preventing another loss from a quick onslaught and a few moves not decided by idiots. The front was sparse, too sparse, but he anxiously kept his units moving conservatively. He knew it was a matter of time until Lincoln fell, and all he could do was use it as a bargaining chip in his fruitless peace deals with the pharaohs. Yet Chondor Rigotu only cared to send a few units, enough to keep the war alive and to make the English suffer, as those in Norwich and York did. He sighs before taking another swig of beer. In Latvia, there is little love for any of the major powers around, and as they say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If there is any group that will let anger and ideology overtake optics, it would be the punk movement. The Clash, a leading voice in the Lithuanian punk movement, has released a song that, despite the government's official opinion of supporting the Pharaoh's war, is vehemently against all war. Even if England is an imperialistic nation, the island is suffering a decimation unlike anything seen since northern Burgundy during the Anglo-Burgundian War. Their hit song, London Calling, puts the listener in the place of Henry V and pushes for peace to be made in Britain. While unlikely to end easily, it sells well across the world, especially in Europe. Field cannon or not, Pontus declares war on Saba with terrible planning and is basically asking for Saba to make an advance onto Damietta, since there is basically no ability to advance into Tamna and Azeba. The only thing they have is a bunch of better ships, which won't matter for any city except for Azeba. Regardless, there's a chance for Pontus to flip a city, but I find it very unlikely. Saba does need to update his navy ASAP. Siam is technologically in line with Khoshutz and a bit behind Wagi, but that doesn't mean much if they don't have the men to keep the front lines full. The Wagi have a chance of taking a few cities from this civ, possibly even the now capital, even if they've lost Si Tamarat temporarily. Shigaste also has been taken back, but Siam doesn't have the capacity to maintain it forever. There's not much hope for them. Singapore advances into the west coast of the Bay of Bengal. While they haven't brought significant land forces to this conflict, The morale is high and ready to approach cities along the eastern coast of India. They're very similar tech-wise, but Singapore is at a disadvantage for a prolonged land invasion as long as Vijayanagara keeps producing units. They aren't bringing enough for a full-scale war yet, but they have a chance if Vijayanagara lets them. Good view of the Selkup's exclave. Always neat when these things pop up in-game. Not sure why Herat is taking so much damage, but hey, it's Seabricks. Why not? Also, some missionaries moving north taking attrition. Classic. Wagi retakes Sitamarat while Chiang Mai dances on the edge of flipping hands to Wagi. Nearly taken already, just needs the last touch. Siam is nearly landlocked, cornered and hopeless. Their path out is extending their spiral longer, so they continue the good fight as long as they live. Turn 384. Frederic Chopin would become one of the Taino's most well-known composers, and help develop the unique Caribbean styles involving keyboards with complex harmonic movements and groovy emotional beats. He would help develop instruments that allowed more fluidity and rhythm, and help break what music was to the Taino. His music would be part of a neo-romantic movement, reconnecting with what the connection to the world and nature meant in a time of rapid modernization and the industrialization of society. Late in the night, the guards on patrol of the greatly weakened walls of Lincoln fell nearly asleep. All was quiet, and a sense of helplessness rang through them all. One soldier kept his eyes open before hearing a tap next to his feet. He woke up and tried to inspect the ball that had landed there. As he tried to get up, a quiet shot rang from behind. He fell to his knees, then onto his face. The spy took out his gas mask as a noxious spray filled the area around him as he tried to escape. Everywhere he went, he dropped tiny balls full of chlorine gas as the pharaohs began their assault on the city, which was very quickly overrun. At the same time, Henry talked with his advisors. They still held Bristol, but the planes from the north kept striking, where it would keep becoming street fighting and guerrilla fighting. So Henry pondered, and he knew in his heart that he could not hold on to Bristol. Send them to London. If we die fighting. The Visigoths have had a rough game, and it's only a waiting game until the sickly dog is brought out back and taken to a farm. While it won't end this episode, the long-term optics aren't great. The Visigoths have slowly lost territory since the start of the game, and never have been able to turn into any power able to take anything. The Alawites are in bad shape. They have one city left, and there is basically nothing they can do to save their nation. Also, despite a war on all fronts, Rome isn't doing anything. This is the perfect opportunity to kick Henry while he's down, but he refuses to do anything. In extremely unshocking news, the attack on Eswatini's islands is repulsed. Using caravels in the atomic era to take a city is a lesson most do not need to learn. But of course, the AI will try anything once, or twice, or a dozen times without learning. Eswatini is gone regardless. Mogadishu is likely to come in soon and snipe the remaining cities with only a puny army to defend their remaining cities. It's Jover. ABBA, a wildly popular group across the world in their own right, have been one of the biggest developers of the pop music genre, with brilliant marketing and infectious songs. They dance right into your heart. While Sierra Leone is not known for its music scene, it has been able to make much of the language more accessible the world round. They would release an album with many top hits that would eventually be used to make a huge movie about trying to figure out the father of the protagonist that was dubbed into multiple languages and pushed Sierra Leone's culture further across the world. In Matamba, Chris Wallace would grow up trying to find meaning in a world where everything seemed dark. The child of refugees from Eswatini, he faced discrimination and only found freedom in his music. He'd become part of the northern-southern hip-hop feud, where he became a household name for his own style and unique blend of southern and northern ndongo music. He would use complex flows on top of dramatic tales of violence and criminal acts. In this, he would develop the name of the notorious B.I.G., or just Biggie. He'd become a developer of the styles that became popular over time in this new era, especially capitalizing on new technologies released across the world that allowed him to replicate and modify sounds. Samori Touré was a troublemaker, and one very good at getting what he wanted and needed. He also was charismatic and good at making a deal. His parents eventually sent him off to Marrakesh for a better education, majoring in business to keep him away from trouble, which was a bit complicated when conflict happened so close nearby. He was able to gather a few thousand people and start a mob at the university he was at for business to stop the draft, which ended violently. The generals nearby saw his abilities in strategizing and keeping people together and gave him a choice. They'd pardon him and he'd be officially trained to help in the war, or he would be sent to prison. You can see what decision he made. John Logie Baird had heard about the development of the cassette tape, decided that he could improve on the methods used and allow video to be recorded just as easily as audio, allowing for better quality video recording. If this technology is able to leave Sri Lanka, it could change the world. The Kossuths once again take Shigatse, which may or may not flip again, but the siege in Ratchasima continues onwards without any signs of stopping. At this rate, the new capital will fall once again without much more after, losing their capital in 2 episodes back to back. Brutal. Some troops seem to move towards Sitamarat, but they likely are afraid of risking losing even more when they've lost so much in their fight for their sovereignty, and nothing short of a miracle can save them. Eswatini attempts to take Ao Digle, but is repulsed due to an overwhelming Mogadishu presence, so Mdaluli is just hoping they don't move enough forces south for an escape plan. The defense of Siteki has been easy so far, but it's where outdated units have been placed to protect an island of less than 90,000 people, which is impressive this far south. Things can change rapidly here, and Mdaluli has drafted up some plans of how to move forwards from here. It looks like Nungar has been busy updating his religion, but that's for next slide. The Nungar core is not as dense as many familiar with the cylinder would expect at this point in the game, especially with a civ in Australia that had such an aggressive start. Still, it's not anywhere near over for them, but they need to move fast if they want back in the game, as the Wagi to their north and east would be happy to give Palawa a favor in exchange for some territory, especially with their new paratroopers. So this Reformation belief just makes missionary spread erode the existing religious pressure from other religions. Neat. As paratroopers come into Chiang Mai, Michelangelo chisels away, his devotion unhampered. Many wondered what it was about him, how in the middle of chaos he continued his work unafraid. No one would know, as he kept working away and made art of the Buddha, mythological folklore, and religious devotions. They say Hugo Wolf was in the countryside, composing another work and desperately attempting to build off of the cultural works and heritage others have done in his time when his hometown flipped. He soon heard of the fall of Nakhon Ratchasima and decided to return to his work. If he were to write his work, it would be the same under the Wagi or Siamese. Turn 385. Guangaito decides that plotting against the exiled government of Rio Grande is a good use of his time, rather than planning his own expansion across the cylinder. While we have a chance to look at the carpet here, we can see the less than hopeful chances of Ikko Iki. While maritime units alone aren't enough to determine one's fate, every Ikko Iki city is coastal, without anywhere enough units to even hope to defend their Swiss cheese territory. They have no one to blame but themselves, as they never moved fast enough to keep up with all the needs their civ needed to. Ibarra, despite being a city that's been pummeled over 2 episodes now, is stagnant. Ecuador is so screwed. Let's be real. You can't even flip a besieged city over 2 episodes. Mexico likely will come in and sweep the near-empty core of Ecuador once they are prepared, and likely some outside help. It also would be Bora-Bora's best chance to work with Mexico to clean up what's left and build up an army able to take the world by storm. The second, more irrelevant war by the Romans this episode has ended. Dominator holds, and nothing has changed. Trajan, you are Roman, you goof. You're the shepherds and Roman. You are supposed to literally have that dog in you. You absolute buffoon. Doing nothing. And Alama, you are just as guilty, sending crossbowmen with marines. Mogadishu moves in Simeone and Mlume. It seems that Eswatini has basically no ability to repel their attacks or retake the cities with Mogadishu's overwhelming force. It's great to see their comeback, but Eswatini can do nothing as their leaders face the truth and pack their bags, as a lone frigate comes by near the capital in the harbor. The Visigoths will not go down without a fight, but Barsino reflips, and Visigoths' chances get a bit more dim. I respect how the Visigoths are going down, partisans rebelling and striking against Sierra Leone advancements. If anything is clear, it's near the end for the Alawites, and there is no coming back from elimination. The Afsharids are in a bit of a rough period with happiness. It's a thing most players typically don't have to deal with past the first few playthroughs. Nothing they can't handle, but it makes it hard to win the game if a relatively small empire can't even keep their happiness up. There are also practically no defenses on Khoshut's west, which is a bit concerning, but forgivable seeing their rapid advance through Siam. A second capital has fallen to a foreign power. Ratchasima flips to Khoshut's, leaving Siam landlocked and unable to access the world. Falling behind in everything, all they can do is hope for shitty peace deals, but it'll only extend their misery. Hope doesn't patch a sinking ship, not that they can even use ships anymore. Verskovo has been retaken by the Nivkh, which I'm sure bodes well for Tuli's ranking in PR. The fact that Tuli are losing this hard is rather embarrassing, but it's not impossible to turn this around. They simply need to solve an issue many civs refuse to learn, and many people also don't as well. You have to commit if you want to succeed. Turn 386. Johann Nepomuk Hummel has been drafted into the Dijon front, and has used this time to work on his music. Eventually, he was noticed for his brilliance and assigned to make music to keep the troops excited and marching into Dijon. At the same time, Bristol flips, and while it can be taken back, it's becoming clear that England is running out of steam. There's not much room for failure, and even there, the pharaohs can decide to commit at any time. A group of English refugees take shelter in Klaksvik, and during this time they find joy in making fun of the world and the absurdity that it brings. Borrowing from their experiences back in England, they find some humor in their suffering and decide to make a film. In this film, titled Life of Britain, a group of a few men build up an army in their attempt to unite Britain under one crown, but are met by various mishaps and misfortunes. Slowly but surely, they manage to prepare for an assault on a city, but find themselves sorely unequipped to take the city. They attempt to look for artifacts that may lead to an advantage in their plot of taking the city of Bristol, but unfortunately the city is taken by an invading army. While the main character attempts to create an overcomplicated plan to retake the city, the previous owners of the city retake it. While readjusting their plans, a bureaucrat comes by and asks if they have a permit for taking the city. They say no, and are fined for taking a city without a permit. While they're arguing over the fine, the city is taken by the invading army once again, which the bureaucrat goes and tries to find the invading army. The protagonists decide to leave and find the king himself. Once they reach the king's castle, they are faced with another bureaucratic annoyance of needing an appointment for an audience with the king. Neither schedule lines up, and eventually they find out he is in Norwich, so they decide to head there and meet him personally. Upon arriving, it is an active war zone in which the king drunkenly attempts to get his units to do what he says. Our protagonists put a sword to his throat, which the king doesn't understand what is happening, where a mishap decapitates him. The king does not die, however. Instead, he now is solely a talking head, which the protagonist steals his crown and has him join his army to unite Britain. Eventually, after many fines, they take over all of Britain, but are unable to keep it due to the massive debt in fines to their own government. Louis Tianhua thought that the music scene in America had been too quiet in these past few years, and decided that it'd be best to group many of the orchestral best of North America to all gather in Mohe Agra in order to work together in building a new project able to project North American music across the world. They would become some of the influential beginners of the new North American movement for orchestral music. Saba has made some progress damaging Damietta, but hasn't acknowledged that you need to protect your gunpowder units with more than outdated ships. Still, you can't deny that Pontus is anything but of questionable mind. You have no units ready to do anything and declare war, being unable to protect your own damn territory? Great work, bestie. Okay, but what about a Karnback, please? Do something. This is one of the few slides of them this release. Just do something. Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa laid in bed, solitary and isolated, thinking about how everything has changed over the past few years, and now he would be subjected to an empire he barely knew. While a monarchist, he had erratic views on the world, and decided to write a memoir on the Alawite nation, knowing that he would be the last generation to remember this great nation. His works would also include dramas that highlight Alawite culture and beliefs. Singapore, in a move of great strategy, moves to take the southern islands before moving up north, which is a pretty great strat for being able to take as much territory as possible with stable supply lines. Vijayanagara seems to be struggling to maintain their lines, and Singapore looks to be the favorite to win the Battle of the Southern Islands. Not sure how they fumbled this battle so badly, but hey, that's part of the Seabricks experience. Guillaume Dufay, rejected by his own father, lived in tragedy, but in this time he eventually was drafted and would go on to help lead the troops in song on the front lines. His choir-like writing and composition helped boost morale around the front line in Ayutthaya, and hopefully would lead to the end of the war. During his time, he would get offers back in Dam to help with the eventual consecration of a temple, which he agreed to do once he was done with his service. Haiphong would be the next target, and Dufay feared a long war that he'd not come home from. Turn 387. Finally, Ecuador flips Ibarra, only taking them over 10 turns, and now they can turn their focus to their core cities to the north, where Mexico is dancing their troops around. There's mostly no winning for Ecuador outside of extending their fairly quiet life for their citizens, but there will be no long-term survival for them even if they hold Ibarra. Ecuador will lose their rank in the PRs. Bristol seems so close to falling, and I cannot imagine that Henry retakes it. It may be Jover for our favorite king here. Also, why are the pharaohs doing so little? You have so many troops just itching to do something. There's nothing in the channel, and it feels like drunken incompetence on both ends. In the distance, one Henry V burps loud enough to break the silence. This is the end of the show. It's over. All that is left is for the cities to be taken and extinguish any struggles left. 2 in the red, 1 in the yellow, and a colony far away. Umdaluli and a few close government officials gathered together, hopped on a ship, grabbing some rations and a few people to join them. They hugged those staying behind, and the captain called for all boarding to get on or be left. And while the iron is hot, the Khoshuts let it cool down. While their aims may not have been as far-reaching as conquering Siam, it seems to be a lost chance to take as much as possible before the Wagi come in and take even more. A hypothetical buffer may be nice, but I think it makes more sense to limit the size of any front the Wagi would have. The Wagi seem ready to advance on at least Tang Dong, which would be a death blow to Siam, with basically no hope of recovering. I mean, they don't have a chance now, but even less debatable. Turn 388. Zhang Yongsil was requested to help with the logistics of the conflict, as the Mexicans came flooding into the Ecuadorian front. Logistics is the one thing Ecuador needed most outside of troops. Ibarra was lost, and the entire front seemed to be near collapsing. He helped revamp the car's fuel economy by moving toward catalytic converters, which, hopefully, could lead to losing less fuel while going towards the front. This, likely, would not be enough, but anything is better than nothing. The foundation shakes, walls caving in, we all quake. It's the end. One down, two taking their last rips of air before the sharks bring them underwater. But in the distance, one ship flees. Destination Siteki, our only hope for survival. They turn the ship south, and the uncomfortable, sticky air wraps around everyone. One person tries to start again, but everyone is too sullen to even respond. And so the long journey south is a quiet one, with silent tears on every face. The ship turns suddenly, moving from southeast to west. There's wild confusion after a bit, after it becomes clear that they are not making it to Siteki. After a bit, Umdaluli announces that there is no colony left, and their only hope is to search across the entire world for a port to survive. There's no saving grace anymore, only survival. Once again, quiet overcomes the ship. With nowhere to turn west, most return to bed with loved ones and let the time pass. Sir Arthur Seymour Sullivan helps produce a comic opera in this time, creating an instant classic throughout the Indian subcontinent, some distraction from the war while they lose even more on their southern front. A good distraction is always appreciated. These helped develop the opera in Vijayanagara and helped spread influence and desire of their culture. It at least helped them with morale a bit. Mark E. Smith, while at a gig in Lithuania, was able to help create a post-punk band under the name of Falling Down. An aggressive punk band with influence from across the world came striking through the Dzungar music world, with a consistent barrage of albums and music building up notoriety the world around. The Dzungars actually have a pretty decent core, but I'm not envious of their position in the cylinder. Saba's assault is slow, but definitely making progress. It may flip back and forth a few times, but I don't think Pontus will keep the city at the conclusion of this war. While there's a chance, we'll see what happens. I remain a Saba stan until the last drop of peasant blood. Paradox games are my thing though, Paige. We also get to see the Taino unique unit here, which has been mentioned enough times already, so I'd rather talk about the core. It's looking alright, but not as ahead as it could be. It's definitely nice to see them finding more tech and building up across the Caribbean. Aguebana II likely doesn't have a chance to win, but they may not be overrun immediately this season, which is always nice to see a Civ able to put up a fight. Barbara Streisand certainly is no figure to pass off. She has been fundamental in the Zhang popular culture over her entire existence, producing films, being an actress, and composing music in her time on the cylinder, winning awards and accolades for her contributions to the nation. No less than 24 studio albums, she is an unforgettable presence in their history. Holy shit, that carpet. That's a very nice carpet. It's hard to overestimate how much the Zhang could help those fucking around to find out. The land is definitely not as clear-cut, but... Turn 389. We have some Wagi peacekeepers holding the line between Palawa and Nungar. In such a tense continent, a peacekeeping force honestly may be the deciding factor between the two Australian powers. Even so, there are routes that could lead to some advances, including in the south near Padaway. Hold on, I'm being informed that Nungar is planning an attack against Palawa. This is quite interesting. Against the Palawa alone, it'd be an easy victory for securing the entire continent, but with the Wagi peacekeeping, it's not going to be easy, especially if he decides now is a good chance for a surprise attack from the north. Side note, only Taranarera is included in the info sheet, not the full name. Weird thing, that is. Henry sits with a few of his advisors outside of London. The island is lost, and they all know that. The artillery are coming, the ships are coming, and now the only decision left is either to die with honor or flee to win another day. Another advisor chimes in that they have little time to make this choice. Heck, the channel is already filled with Pharaoh ships, so any escape is risky. Bavaria hasn't taken Dijon, but it seems to be just a delayed death. So Henry stands up, nods, and sets off to his room. His advisors head off, and the generals are notified of his decision. The nation is gone. All that is left are a few scattered units contacted through telephone lines, and maybe a few ships across the world. Eswatini is now a government in exile, attempting to run in this exile, but to no real recognition. Umdaluli now lives in darkness, and his people abandoned by a man who they promised their loyalty to. Now, Mogadishu, Ndongo, Saba, and Palawa hold the tiny scraps left to govern a people abandoned. Also, nice swipe, Palawa. That's what we like to see here. Leovigild's government's legitimacy has collapsed, and a variety of different partisan units have taken up charge of the military. While less than perfect, there's largely no hope for the state's survival, so a loose confederation of various nationalistic extremist movements will be the Visigoths' final days. Yet, Sierra Leone marches on to Narbo. If they maintain their momentum, they'll be set for the next phase of the Battle Royale. Kalibangan flips to Singapore, as their strategy works about as well as they can wish. Singapore is a civ that can lose cities and gain cities in the same episode, and seemingly fall down and up at the same time. The assault on Rakigare has begun, leading to it falling to yellow. While it may flip a few times, I don't see it being likely that Vijayanagar will be able to hold the city without reinforcements, which from there, Mangalapura is only a small hop away. Things are looking good for Singapore. Francois-Joseph Paul, or Comte, helped lead the Bora-Bora Navy across the Drake Passage, a dangerous and harrowing journey that nearly no navy dares attempt to cross. But he managed to get every single ship across nearly unscathed. For this, and his bold fighting in Patagonia, he was awarded the highest possible honor. With that, Bora-Bora's chances are much better. They've had 2 episodes of them rocking South America, and it seems they have no reason to stop. Taking Tiwanaku seems like the next obvious choice, or leading into Ecuador. Take your pick. Either way, Bora-Bora stocks are going to rise. Siam is left a rump state, collapsing within and nowhere to turn. The Wagi's next turn likely will take the 3rd capital, which Rama V continues to indulge in his vices in spite of the world, and there is no coming back. I can only imagine the shame and weight that Rama must have now. Thank you all for your patience this episode. We wanted to make this the best we could in the circumstances given to us, and we appreciate being given the chance to narrate for you all. Feel free to share your thoughts. We'd love to hear. There can only be one winner of Seabricks. There's no room for seconds, and the onslaught of death must be ruthless and heartless. As this episode has come and gone, we see different civs fighting over the same land in the hope of ending the eternal cycle of violence, with their vision and culture dominating, of course. Tune in next time to see how things go.